burden of human papillomavirus infections and cervical cancer cases in the country, government has budgeted 20 million emalangeni and plans to introduce the HPV vaccine for young girls from the age 9 to 14 years in schools. Mr. Speaker, the health of the nation is an important resource that the government will continue to invest in. In this regard, the government has allocated 2.42 billion emalangeni to the Ministry of Health. This translates to about 2,069 emalangeni spending per capita, putting us in the top 10% of health spending per capita in sub-Saharan Africa. What I realized this morning, Honourable Speaker, was that the number last year included capital, this year does not include capital, and if one removes the COVID-19 direct response things, our budget for health has gone up with more than 100 million emalangeni in this last year. Mr. Speaker, government has demonstrated its commitment in turning around the economy to achieve macro-fiscal stability and growth through the strategic roadmap, accompanied by improvements in human capital development. Recognizing the importance of human capital as a contributor to economic growth, government has received support for a human capital project that is geared towards holistic child development, improving learning outcomes for school-going children, and adequately preparing adolescents and the youth to become globally competitive and productive citizens. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, the government rolled out the Grade Zero program to an additional 100 public schools countrywide. The program also benefited from support received through UNICEF in mapping early childhood care and development education, the main objective being to obtain a broad understanding of the current state of early childhood care centres. Mr. Speaker, free primary education has been viewed as a consolidated program aimed at creating a conducive environment that features minimum barriers to access and quality education. The program has been instrumental in addressing some of the barriers to access and schooling. Primary school enrollment rates have increased from 72% in 2007 to 94% currently. Under the free primary education program, government introduced a personal ID number for every pupil in order to control any overspending on fees. Currently, the processing of FPE payments is manual and cumbersome. Government is exploring ways to improve the system and migrate to electronic processes. Mr. Speaker, in 2022, government is planning to introduce the qualification beyond Eswatini General Certificate of Secondary Education. This program aims to improve the entry requirement at university level education. In other countries like Zimbabwe and Ghana, the entry requirement at university is the A level. However, in our country, it is still the EGCSE. This program will introduce the 4 years of EGCSE at 28 identified schools in the country, commencing in 2022 and rolled out to other schools in subsequent years. Upon completion of the 4 years, the first batch of students will then proceed to A levels. This program will provide a range of disciplines beyond science, including business studies and humanities. Government has also allocated an additional 30 million emalangeni in this coming budget towards e-learning program. Mr. Speaker, the audit of right-sizing the teaching service in all public schools regarding school quotas has been done. A total of 761 teachers are being redeployed. The main objective of this exercise is to ensure that schools are manned by the appropriate staff in terms of the numbers and qualifications. Mr. Speaker, the Technical and Vocational Education and Training Enhancement Project was completed in June 2021. The program benefited Eswatini College of Technology, what we refer to as ECOT, and Kwamile Voktum through support from the Republic of China and Taiwan. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to improve and expand infrastructure provisions both in schools and tertiary institutions. In 2021, 169 classrooms and 49 staff houses were constructed and 99 structures were rehabilitated. At the tertiary level, the rehabilitation of Ntjintja, Voctum and Ecot is ongoing. Government also undertook the construction of hand-washing facilities in many primary and secondary schools. Government is allocating 3.53 billion emalangeni to the Ministry of Education and Training to cater for all educational and training programs. If we add the OVC grants and the scholarships, which also support education and training, this number grows to 4.05 billion emalangeni, approximately 16% of the total national budget, putting us in the top 10% of education spending in sub-Saharan Africa. With this huge investment made by taxpayers, Mr. Speaker, with the support of the ILO, government has prioritized the establishment of the Unemployment Benefit Fund in Eswatini towards a comprehensive social protection for all. This intervention seeks to establish a gender-inclusive unemployment protection system as part of the comprehensive national social security and social protection policy. Government's also initiated a planned program which aims to strengthen the labour market information and skills anticipation system in Eswatini. The plan seeks to position the system as a one-stop shop for labour market information and job matching in Eswatini. Government will continue to improve access and efficiencies in human resource skills development. Currently, 14,000 students are supported through the study loan scheme to study at tertiary institutions locally and abroad. With an annual expenditure of over 300 million emalangeni, recovery of loans from the past beneficiaries amounts to 60 million emalangeni on average per annum. Due to this glaring under-recovery of dispersed scholarships, government is pursuing the establishment of a scholarship revolving fund to be managed by a bank. In 2022, the regulations for this fund will be finalized, and that should then mean that the fund grows on an annual basis, allowing more students to benefit from this fund. I would like to remind scholarship recipients that it is a privilege and not a right to receive these loans. The money that funds these scholarships is from hard-earned income from taxpayers, and it's meant for the sole purpose of getting an education. Government will not hesitate to cancel the scholarships of students that abuse this privilege and engage in violence and other unlawful behavior. An amount of 439 million emalangeni has been set aside by the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, of which 361 million emalangeni is for scholarships for tertiary education. Mr. Speaker, government continually strives to provide better social protection services. In Eswatini, the OVC fund is instrumental in supporting vulnerable children. There's been a significant increase in the enrollment of children at high schools over the years, with nearly 51% of high school children enrolled under this fund. During this COVID-19 pandemic, the number of children falling within the category of OVCs increased from approximately 58,000 children to over 60,000 children. In the past 5-year period, there's been an annual average increase of 1,881 elderly persons per year. In partnership with mobile money operators and EPTC, government pays 80% of beneficiaries through mobile cash transfers and 20% of the beneficiaries through the 5 major banks in the country. Government is currently dispersing elderly grants to over 75,000 beneficiaries, with a budget allocation of 466.8 million emalangeni. The Kingdom has significantly increased the amounts of grants distributed to persons with disabilities in 2021-2022 from 20 to 88 beneficiaries per Ntjintja. Mr. Speaker, government is working on an automated cash payment system that will improve the efficiency and turnaround time for all grant disbursements. In response to the vulnerability levels experienced among the elderly, government is introducing a funeral cover for elderly persons. Mr. Speaker, more than 1 billion emalangeni has been spent in the last 2 years to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This money was used to quickly build the Lebombo Referral Hospital Wing, COVID-19 wing it's now referred to, a plethora of hospital equipment, personal protective equipment, ambulances, and food for more than 300,000 people that could not support themselves anymore. Government's grateful to all eMaSwati and businesses that contributed towards the COVID-19 emergency response. We are especially indebted to the Kirsch Foundation for the immense support to government of more than 300 million emalangeni. Many lives were saved due to the timely investment made in the COVID-19 emergency response. In early 2021, Eswatini also experienced a tropical cyclone resulting in damage across the country. Roads, bridges and houses with over 200 million emalangeni were damaged. Government was able to swiftly mobilize resources to rehabilitate the bridges and damaged houses. More than 270 houses and 68 bridges were constructed through NDMA in partnership with the Mbutfo Eswatini Defence Force. The government has continued to provide for social protection and has allocated a total of 762.2 million emalangeni in this year's budget. Mr. Speaker, the disruptions brought about by COVID-19, compounded by the civil unrest experienced in 2020, have brought about new food security challenges in the country. Government acknowledges the need to upscale local food production to ensure sustainable accessibility and availability of food commodities within the country. To that end, numerous agricultural programs were prioritized in the past year. The input subsidy program, which has been running for over 5 years, has resulted in significant increases in the local production of maize. In 2021, a total of 1,042 metric tons of maize was produced, marking a significant improvement from the 86,000 metric tons in 2020. However, this continues to remain below the national requirements of 140,000 tons of maize. The program has gained momentum and demand has been growing on an annual basis. Government aspires to increase the number of beneficiaries from 10,000 to 15,000 over the medium term. Government has set aside 42.2 million emalangeni to cater for the input subsidy program. Currently, more than half of the contoured fields in Eswatini Nationland in the Highveld are not being used. The high rainfall in this area is why maize is set to grow well, but farmers complain that the returns are marginal due to the small plots of land. For this reason, the government encourages farmers to group together as shareholders and form farming companies, as has been done through Eswatini with many sugar projects, so that they can benefit from the economies of scale of commercial. Eswatini and Finclude stand ready to assist in this regard. The government of Eswatini also facilitated the formation of irrigation schemes and construction of scoop dams to support agricultural production across the country. Through the implementation of these programs, the country now produces and exported approximately 33,675 metric tons of fruit and 315 metric tons of vegetables this past year. The Ministry of Agriculture has been allocated 1.36 billion emalangeni to improve food security and minimize external risks. Echoing His Majesty's sentiments in the Parliament opening speech, we have too few entrepreneurs in Eswatini and we need to see more successful eMaSwati entrepreneurs. Despite the Youth Revolving Fund, the SME Fund, the RDF grants, the Loan Guarantee Scheme, the Export Loan Guarantee Scheme and FinCorp, we still hear of challenges faced by entrepreneurs, with many young applicants failing to meet the requirements for these funds. I want to take this opportunity to encourage entrepreneurs to start following their dreams with the limited resources that they have. A loan should be a stimulus to your business and not the start. You might think that you have no resources, but every Liswati has access to some resources, such as land. And I'd encourage you to develop an entrepreneurial spirit and start with what you have. I'll use an example. If you plan to start a beekeeping business, then you find some old pallets, you loan a hammer, and you make some rough boxes to keep bees in. You then sell the honey through one of the local vendors. When you now approach the funding institutions with a running business, proof that your area is good for honey production, a market for your product, and a known price per kg of honey, your chances to get a loan are a lot better than only coming with a business plan. Mr. Speaker, access to potable water in the country stands at 67%. Currently, there are many projects being implemented, including the potable water schemes in Eswatini for 14 Ntjintja centres, another 14 Ntjintja centres in the Manzini region, the rollout of LUCIP Phase 2, and the WASH program. These will expand our national access to potable water to 75%. These projects should all have been completed in 18 months' time. This is a great achievement, and we congratulate all of those involved. Over 152,000 people are impacted by the eSwade projects. eSwade's current project portfolio stands at 10 projects, of which 4 have been completed and 6 are ongoing. eSwade has undertaken water harvesting works which are of great significance, aimed at eradicating poverty and spurring economic activity. The LUCIP Phase 2 main canal and secondary distribution systems have now been completed, under which a net area of 5,273 hectares will be developed and irrigated. This project aims to establish another 27 farming enterprises, which will create 4,500 jobs for Eswatini this year. A very exciting project that's currently underway is the Ntjintja Water Augmentation Project. This project, which is due for completion in 2027, is related to the building of large dams, canals, and a hydro scheme, initially irrigating the 10,000 hectares Maggie spoke about, but ultimately irrigating about 30,000 hectares of land, mainly in the Eswatini region. It's expected to create an additional 10,000 jobs at full implementation. Government has budgeted 507 million for LUCIP and 26 million for the Ntjintja for resettlement of affected families and environmental mitigation. Mr. Speaker, despite the challenges in the tourism industry due to the pandemic, Eswatini retains its commitment to the sector. Officially declared protected conservation areas have increased, which has led to an increase in the percentage of protected lands from 5.2% in 2020 to 6.15% in 2021, referring to the total surface area of the country. Government is planning for a new game reserve around the Lebombo area, enclosing about 60,000 hectares. That will then be the largest game farm and conservation area in the kingdom and will create wonderful opportunities in the tourism industry. We are anticipating that the lifting of the COVID restrictions and the newly introduced 24-hour access through the Ntjintja border post will facilitate an increase in regional and domestic tourism. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, Government undertook the amalgamation of the Government Computer Services Department with the Royal Science and Technology Park. This was intended to promote the availability of all ICT resources centrally, minimizing duplication in resources, to also eliminate working in silos, and to ensure that the implementation of e-government initiatives is fast-tracked. A priority area in the reduction of the cost of communication and ensuring secure internet access for all citizens. A price benchmarking study was undertaken in 2021 through the Communication Commission, which established that the wholesale prices of internet and leased lines at Eswatini are significantly higher than the competitive market in SADC. A directive was then issued to Eswatini Post and Communications Commission, or Corporation, to reduce wholesale prices for leased lines and internet. Government has provided 360.7 million emalangeni to the Ministry of ICT to improve the performance of this fast-developing sector. Mr. Speaker, infrastructure development remains the key driver to achieve sustainable and equitable growth for the country's citizens and residents. The infrastructure sector has suffered setbacks and was not spared from the impact of the pandemic, the civil unrest, and the climate change. Mr. Speaker, the maintenance of our public roads has been glaringly inadequate for many years, coupled with the recent high rainfall that's led to the devastating deterioration of our roads. There has not been enough preventative maintenance on our tarred roads, which involves the sealing of cracks and keeping the drainage open. Our gravel roads also need to be shaped more regularly and re-gravelled where needed. We have allocated an additional 80 million emalangeni to the Ministry of Works for the maintenance of roads and a reprioritised an additional 150 million to the capital budget to start resurfacing existing tarred roads where patching is starting to become counterproductive. The establishment of the Road Agency Fund has been tabled in the House as a sustainable and permanent solution to our roads crisis. The objective of this fund is to tender out all road maintenance to the private sector. We envisage it to be funded by the savings from shutting down government departments currently responsible for road maintenance, the road toll charges at the border crossings, additional funds from the fiscus, and an additional 30 cents fuel tax, which I intend to table with the fuel tax bill. Discussions with the affected civil servants have started, and I'd like to invite them to use their retrenchment packages to form companies to do the actual maintenance work, as we would like to see the road agency empower smaller road contractors. Once again, I'd like to thank the members of Parliament for this wonderful initiative. The completion of the Lukula Big Bend Road, referred to as the MR13, and the progress made on the upgrades of the Manzini-Mbadlane Highway, MR3, will transform the road transport landscape significantly in the Kingdom of Eswatini. The improvements that have been done in rural areas by introducing the pro-based technology and the single seal approach to road paving has also contributed positively to improving the country's road network. Mr. Speaker, prioritisation of Eswatini roads remains key in ensuring that the benefits of growth are enjoyed by all citizens and residents of Eswatini. The relaunch of the Ntjintja Road, MR13, is a positive. I'm just realising now I'm referring to MR13 and Ntjintja Road and the Big Bend Road, so there's a small mistake there, Honourables, in the speech. Forgive me for that. Is a positive contribution to improve the road network in Eswatini region that will ultimately stimulate economic activity along the Ntjintja corridor. Government anticipates that the project will be completed within the next 18 months. Mr. Speaker, as highlighted by His Majesty in his Parliament address, Eswatini needs to find a self-sufficient, sustainable and renewable solutions to its national energy requirements by 2025. This provides us with an opportunity to positively restructure our economy and promote investments in this area. Mr. Speaker, significant progress has been made with electricity access through the Rural Electrification Programme, which continues to uplift the lives of many eMaswati. To date, the population with access to electricity is above 82%, which is expected to expand to 87% over the next financial year, primarily through the Rural Electricity Access Fund. Access to electricity was 21% in 2001. Government appreciates the support provided by the World Bank Group for financing the 132 kVA line as an upgrade to the current 11 kVA line from Nhlangano to Lavomisa, which will enable electricity access to over 8,000 homesteads along that line. The Lifeline tariff was launched in August 2021 to offer a discount to customers who meet both criteria of a lower than 75 kilowatt-hour monthly consumption and a monthly income of less than 3,500 emalangeni per month. It is anticipated that a total of 40,000 customers will ultimately benefit from this newly launched pro-poor scheme, which will contribute to the country's objectives of providing access to energy to all eMaswati. Government, through the energy regulator, continues with a competitive bidding process or procurement process for new renewable power generation capacity. Resources will be mobilized to carry out further studies for the potential of wind power generation in the country. The Petroleum Act of 2020 is now operational, and establishes the Eswatini National Petroleum Company, which is responsible for the planned construction and operation of the Strategic Oil Reserve Facility. Government has allocated 529 million emalangeni to the Ministry of Natural Resources to carry out its programs. Mr. Speaker, since operations have begun in 2014 at the KM3 International Airport, we haven't experienced full capacity. Commercial activity remains constrained. However, efforts are underway to increase airline activity and have the airport facility operating as a distribution hub to other destinations. Operation, what we refer to as RENAC, has acquired two 50-seater aeroplanes to operate flights from Eswatini to Cape Town, to Durban, to Johannesburg, and to Harare. The planes are being rebranded now and are expected to be operational by June 2022. Mr. Speaker, the Regional Development Fund continues to be the main funding mechanism for the implementation of rural development projects. In 2022-2023, the government 177 million emalangeni to the RDF to facilitate the continuation of these projects. It's important to note that while the original micro-project program was established and run with EU funding, government took over the running and funding of this project since 2007 and is very proud of the achievements under this employment and infrastructure generating program. In the last year, government facilitated the development and launch of 15 chiefdom development plans. As a result of the implementation of these chiefdom development plans, a total of 23 projects in the different chiefdoms have been undertaken. These include donga rehabilitation, establishment of a feedlot, a dairy production center, goat production, beekeeping, construction of low-level bridges, and earth dams with downstream irrigation. In 2021, the government continued with a program of rehabilitating Tinkundla centers, following the demarcation and increase of Tinkundla from 55 to 59. The reconstruction of Mzambama in Nkundla was completed, with the construction of Manzini South and Gilgal Tinkundla centers is ongoing. A number of Tinkundla centers were damaged during the civil unrest experienced in 2021, and a rapid assessment on the cost and extent of the damage has been commissioned. A budget of 385 million emalangeni has been allocated to the Ministry of Tinkundla to fulfill its obligations. Mr. Speaker, despite the challenging socio-economic landscape, the Eswatini Royal Police Service were able to contain the rate of crime and road traffic accidents, as well as strengthen state security frameworks. The police service has been steadfast in ensuring that safety and security arrangements prevail amid the civil unrest. This was achieved by strengthening an array of strategies and is attributed to the increase in police visibility in crime hotspots and the implementation of educational and awareness programs. In an effort to improve quality service delivery to the public, the government has provided the police with 84 new vehicles to enable prompt response to distress calls and incidents of crime. To address critical manpower shortages in the police service, the government is in the process of filling 200 new posts, and enlistment has already been initiated. Mr. Speaker, the Imbutfo Eswatini Defence Force worked tirelessly to maintain the stability, peace and security in the kingdom. The Army conducted peacekeeping missions regionally and internationally and disaster relief missions during the heavy rains and storms witnessed in the country and neighbouring countries. The Army is commended for its support during Cyclone Eloise and the rehabilitation work that followed. They were instrumental in helping NDMA with their teams and resources, particularly the rebuilding of homesteads affected by the cyclone. His Majesty's Correctional Services continues to provide programs aimed at bringing law offenders back into society in order to improve public order, safety and stability. The rehabilitation aims to foster productive citizens in order to break the cycle of crime, repeat offences and animosity in the communities, thus bringing harmony and a new start to previously convicted offenders. Mr. Speaker, the government is to make provision for basic human rights and its citizens. This includes, but is not limited to, the right to health, education, and all other interdependent rights, including economic rights. Government is committed to the sustainable, particular focus on the most vulnerable. The need to ensure gender equality in the implementation of these SDGs cannot be overemphasized. The Human Rights Commission has investigated and provided a number of recommendations which seek to improve the human rights record of the country. The Commission has played an important role in the investigation of the recently witnessed civil unrest. Mr. Speaker, through the National Mechanism of Reporting and Follow-up Unit, the government will continue to honour its reporting obligations under the various human rights treaties that the Kingdom is party to. Reporting on the implementation of these treaties is beneficial to the Kingdom for self-assessment on the measures taken to give effect to the rights and freedoms recognised and guaranteed in our country. The National Mechanism for Reporting and Follow-up Unit is now focused on finalising the report on Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and also prepare a report on the Convention of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, report on Convention of Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, and the Common Core document. These reports will then be presented before the Human Rights Council. The UN Human Rights Council. Corruption remains a challenge in Eswatini and continues to undermine professional service delivery to Eswatini. The ACC continues to investigate cases, but only 5 cases have been referred to the DPP, of which only 1 has been completed. Government has resorted to using a blunt tool of shutting down certain entities where corrupt practices are prevalent. In 2022-2023, the budget allocation of 24 million has been provided to the ACC. Mr. Speaker, government, in its bid to develop and operationalise an electronic case management system. The system will capture, track and manage a court case throughout its life cycle. Apart from supporting the key functions of the Ministry of Justice, the system will be able to utilised by other stakeholders, which include the Royal Eswatini Police Service, the Judiciary, His Majesty's Correctional Service, the Directorate of the Public Prosecutions, Anti-Corruption Commission, Commission on Human Rights and Public Administration, and the AG, Attorney General, and integrate seamlessly with other relevant systems within the government network. Government is in the process of establishing a legal aid system which will ensure equal access to justice for all, especially the poor and the vulnerable groups consisting of children, women, and people living with disabilities. Legal aid allows free legal representation for vulnerable people in the country. The government will soon be finalising the amendment to the Legal Practitioners Act and the Legal Aid Bill. The government will solicit assistance from the country's development partners to help develop the system. Parliament's requested to facilitate the passing of these bills once they are tabled. Government has provided 3.5 million emalangeni to cater for this legal aid unit to start. Small claims courts were established during 2019-2020 financial year, and the court started operating in August 2021 with an initial staff complement of 5 commissioners, 5 clerks and 5 legal assistants distributed regionally. Small claims courts will reduce the heavy burden and long-standing backlog on cases at the Magistrates Court. Mr. Speaker, in an effort to address disputes between the taxpayer and the tax administrator, the Revenue Appeals Tribunal was established and will be operational from the 1st of March 2022. Mr. Speaker, the government continued to strengthen mechanisms for good governance, accountability, transparency, integrity and value for money in the management of public resources. During the financial year 2019-2020, 64 million emalangeni was recovered from losses contained in the reports and other outstanding recoveries from previous years. We would like to thank the PAC for their commitment towards this task. Forensic audits were conducted on a number of projects, including the Nhlangano Stunuza Road, Manzini Mpanze Road, which refers to as Lot 1, Mpanze to Mbadlane Road, which is referred to as Lot 2. And government commits to have these reports finalized by the end of March 2022 and tabled by the end of April 2022. Furthermore, auditing the COMESA institutions, SACU Secretariat, and the ICC Fish is ongoing. Mr. Speaker, as part of government's mandate in ensuring a sound financial regulatory framework for the country, several banking and non-banking laws will be reviewed in order to create an environment which promotes private sector development. Developments within the financial sector in 2021 included the automation of Eswatini Stock Exchange, which has been completed. This will facilitate the participation of ordinary Eswatini to buy and sell company shares and debt instruments using their cell phones. This move will facilitate electronic trading, which should encourage more listings as well as acting trading exchange. The Eswatini Stock Exchange also incorporates an SME platform that enables small and medium enterprises to participate in the stock exchange. It's expected that Swati-owned businesses will benefit from accessing available financial resources in order to expand their businesses. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to pursue fiscal consolidation in order to bring our fiscus to a sustainable level. To this end, the government has adopted a post-COVID-19 economic recovery plan alongside the fiscal adjustment plan, incorporating growth and revenue enhancement measures alongside expenditure decreasing measures. Both of these plans were meant to augment Eswatini's existing development plans and strategies towards achievement of the country's development goals. Consequent to delays or alterations to implementation of prescribed policy measures, the fiscal adjustment plan was amended in October 2020 and further in October 2021. The amendment called for a total adjustment of 4.2% of GDP on the expenditure side, while revenue targets were revised to 0.6% of GDP adjustment across the 3-year period, as opposed to the initial 2% of GDP. We are still on track to achieve the goal of a 1% fiscal deficit by 2023-2024, which will put us on a sustainable path. On the revenue side, the amended adjustment strategy includes the combination of policy measures and administrative efficiency gains. The wage bill soared at alarming rates for 5 years before the hiring freeze policy was implemented. The accelerated increase began in 2013 and 2014, when the wage bill increased by 13.5% from 4 billion to 4.5 billion. It increased by a further 7.5% to 4.8 billion in 2014-2015. Another 10.7% increase in 2015-2016 to reach 5.3 billion. And then a further increase of 22.5% to 6.5 billion in 2018, the wage bill grew by 6% to reach 6.9 billion emalangeni. Over the 5 years, from 2013, there's been a total growth of 61% of the wage bill. In 2018-2019, there was a slight reduction to this alarming growth trajectory, with a relatively muted increase of 2.5%, settling at 7.1 billion, due to the hiring freeze that was implemented towards the beginning of that year. In 2019, further dampening of this trend continued, with only a 0.5% increase in the wage bill. In 2020-2021, automatic notching, the COVID-19 hiring, and the cost of living adjustment in that year led to a further 6.5% increase to 7.4 billion emalangeni. In 2021-2022, the wage bill is projected to decrease to 7.3 billion emalangeni, a reduction of 2.1%. This is further projected to decrease in 2022-2023 by 1.7%. All these numbers exclude the pension contributions. The hiring freeze has been successful in muting the growth of the wage bill, increasing by only 3.2% over the 5-year outlay from its implementation, and resulting in an average growth of 0.64%, a sharp contrast to the 12% average growth recorded in the preceding 5-year period. The headcount was increasing by about 2% per year during the years before the hiring freeze. The hiring freeze led to a headcount increase of only 0.8% during the first year of implementation, but since 2019-2020, there have been steady reductions in the headcount numbers. 2019-2020 saw a decrease of 1.1% in the headcount, followed by a decrease of 0.8% in 2020-2021, and a further decrease of 1.4% in 2021-2022. There's been an average decrease of just over 1% per year since the policy was implemented. Mr. Speaker, even though a huge amount of effort is going into reducing the exorbitant wage bill, we remain very aware of the fact that civil servants have been getting no or below inflation cost of living adjustments recently. In spite of about a 1 billion reduction in our budget this year, an effort has been made to accommodate COLA at 220 million emalangeni, a salary review exercise of 15 emalangeni, and 55 million emalangeni for appeals. I trust the honourable MPs, after discussions at home, will come back and approve a COLA for us hard-working civil servants. Mr. Speaker, public enterprises continue to execute their mandates. However, there's been a continuous decline in the profitability of the commercial entities as a result of the COVID-19 global pandemic. The entities fully dependent on government subvention were faced with cash flow challenges due to the 5% cut that was implemented mid-year, resulting in many scaling down their operations. Following the decision to reform public enterprises as part of the Fiscal Adjustment Plan, I'm pleased to report that the Eswatini Economic Policy and Analysis and Research Centre, referred to as EswatiniTV, has completed the study commissioned to streamline the public entities. The report has recommended a reduction of entities from 49 to about 30, which will result in significant cost savings for government. It is now for us as policymakers to scrutinise, push for, and implement the recommendations of the study. We're requesting the support of this House, as well as all relevant stakeholders in this important endeavour to increase government's efficiency and reduce unnecessary costs. Implementing the set of reforms within this financial year will allow us to see the positive impact on revenue performance as early as next year. In reforming the country's procurement system, the government has, amongst other things, developed an e-government procurement strategy at a cost of 21 million emalangeni. We've developed a national supplier base database and an e-quotation system aimed at improving transparency, efficiency, and a reduction in cost. Public procurement regulations have been issued and a review and appeal structure has been established for adjudication of matters involving public procurement processes. Previously, in large part due to government's vast stock of arrears to suppliers, procurement was another source of inefficiency in government spending. Addressing arrears has led to increased confidence in government's greater efficiencies and lower prices in procurement. Mr. Speaker, revenues for the year 2021-2022 are projected to amount to 17.49 billion, corresponding to 25% of GDP and indicating a 7% decline in total revenue compared to 2020-2021. Domestic tax revenue is projected to account for about 15% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, as you'll recall, we received 8.3 billion emalangeni through the SACA receipts last year, which was 2020-2021. We received 6.3 billion this year, the year 2020-2022, and initial projections estimated that we were going to get 4.3 billion emalangeni for 2022-2023. The sharp reduction was a consequence of the delayed impact of the first COVID-19 lockdown. Fortunately, SACO collections were not impacted as heavily as initially predicted, and measures to increase our output are also bearing fruit. SACO revenue receipts for 2022-2023 is 5.8 billion emalangeni. I know the newspapers were speaking about 6 billion, but that they were just, they didn't have the exact figure. The other good news is that our estimations for next year, which is 2023-2024, is currently 8.7 billion emalangeni. This is a conservative estimation for 2023-2024, as it doesn't take into account the full impact of the measures that we've been implementing. We have started working on regulations for a SACU stabilization fund that will force us to save money of our SACU income in good years to cater for when SACU is down, hopefully alleviating harsh impacts of the volatile SACU receipts. Mr. Speaker, total government expenditure for the year 2021-2022 was budgeted at 24.04 billion emalangeni. The projected expenditure at the end of the year, though, is 21.5 billion emalangeni due to lower than anticipated drawdown on capital programs, approximately 30.1% of GDP. Total projected expenditure for the year 2021-2022 is approximately 3.9 percentage points lower than the outturn of 2020-2021. Mr. Speaker, the deficit for the financial year 2020-2021 was budgeted at 6.5% of GDP, if you recall, which is higher than the 4.9% deficit to GDP ratio for the financial year 2020-2021. This equates to an increase of 1.3 billion to 4.6 billion emalangeni. Whilst we've been able to fund part of it through local borrowing, a large part will be financed through external borrowing for budget support. Mr. Speaker, preliminary debt figures show that at the end of December 2021, total public debt stock stood at 27.7 billion emalangeni, which translates to 39.8% of GDP. This is composed of domestic debt amounting to 16.6 billion, which is equivalent to 23.8% of GDP, and external debt amounting to 11.1 billion, which is equivalent to 16% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, the scope of extending domestic financing is saturated, and government is therefore negotiating budget support from external multilateral financial institutions, mainly AFDB and the World Bank, to finance the 2021-2022 year's expenditure. 5 external loans, though, have matured in 2021, effectively reducing government's obligations to external sources. This will dampen the debt servicing costs of the loans, keeping the fiscal path more or less constant. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that due to the efforts of this government, Eswatini will propose to float treasury bonds on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and has received approval from the South African Reserve Bank. South African banks have already shown an appetite for these bonds. This is a relatively low-risk plan to raise financing due to the currency peg between the Lilangeni and the South African Rand. I will still bring the request for approval for this bill to the House. Mr. Speaker, I'll present the budget estimates for the financial year 2022-2023 at the moment. Mr. Speaker, government revenue excluding grants for 2022-2023 fiscal year is projected to reach 18.7 billion emalangeni, which is 23.8% of GDP, a decrease of 2% from the 2021-2022 initial budgeted figures. Of this, SACU receipts declined from 6.4 here, but it's 6.3 billion in 2021-2022 to 5.8 billion in 2022-2023. Non-SACU revenue increased from 12.6 billion to 12.8 billion, a growth of 1.6%. Total income taxes are projected to increase by close to 0.6% from an estimate of 6.3 billion emalangeni in 2021-22 to 6.9 billion in 2022-2023. The percentage there looks wrong. This is because of the higher expected growth and employment in 2022-2023 compared to 2021-2022. Out of this, corporate income taxes are expected to grow from 1.8 billion this previous year to 2.1 billion in 2022-2023. Similarly, personal income taxes are expected to grow by 10.5% to 4.3 billion emalangeni. Mr. Speaker, taxes on goods and services, excluding SACA receipts, are expected to decrease by 5.3% to 5.5 billion emalangeni. VAT to decrease by 3.2% to 3.8 billion emalangeni. Fuel tax is expected to decrease by 6.7%, amounting to 1.4 billion emalangeni. The levy on imported vehicles is projected to decline around 35.5% from 20 million emalangeni to 12.9 million emalangeni. Mr. Speaker, total expenditure for the financial year 2022-2023 is expected to be 23.2 billion emalangeni. The appropriated recurrent expenditure is set to be 16.2 billion, an increase of 1.9% compared to the previous year. Total budget allocation to capital projects amounts to 5.4 billion emalangeni. A total expenditure for 2022-2023 reviews for a minimal decrease of 3.5% compared to last year's budget, amounting to 24.04 billion.
Sorry, Honourable Minister, it's now interruption time. I will request the Honourable DPM, Deputy Prime Minister, to invoke Standing Order 205 to suspend Standing Order number 24, Stokatzela. DPM.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move that the Honourable House invokes Standing Order 205 to suspend Standing Order 24 so that the House can finish the business. I move.
We invoke Standing Order 205 to suspend Standing Order number 24. Those in favor should say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it, and the ayes have it. Honourable Minister, Finance, please proceed.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the budget deficit for the financial year 2022-2023 is projected at 4.8% of GDP, amounting to 3.8 billion emalangeni. Mr. Speaker, allow me to unpack the tax changes planned for 2022-2023. Government is introducing a capital gains tax for businesses that is aimed at closing loopholes in businesses that businesses are using to pay less tax. This capital gains tax will not be for domestic use. Government intends to lift tax brackets, leaving more cash in people's pockets, earning less than 250,000 emalangeni per year. Individuals will only start paying tax from 4,000 emalangeni per month, not the current 3,500 emalangeni per month. Unfortunately, we can't afford to have this reduction other than lifting the upper limits of those earning more. The proposal is to lift the upper tax bracket from 33% to 36%. Honourable Speaker.
Order, please, order, please, order, please. Let's allow the Honourable Minister. Batonisha, let's allow the Minister Aketsele Batonisha. Okay, it's true, Batonisha. But let's allow him to. Honourable Minister, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for the encouragement, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, this proposal is to lift the upper tax brackets, which I've made. It would mean that 80% of taxpayers would be better off with more money in their pockets, and 20% of the higher income earners paid more than 300,000 emalangeni per year would be the ones that are worse off. Mr. Speaker, it's understood that will negatively affect everyone in this room, but I appeal for all of us to put the interest of the poor before our own. This measure will be addressing our income inequality, which is a problem in Eswatini. We're in the top 10 in the world on income inequality. Government is proposing amendments to their VAT legislation and reconsiders some non-VATable items that are not pro-poor and have standard rated VAT on electricity, but all of this excludes domestic use. We are introducing presumptive tax for SMEs to simplify the administrative processes and remove the requirements of audited financials for payment of tax. Mr. Speaker, we are reducing corporate tax from 27.5% to 25%. This is in line with the rest of the world reducing tax rates and aims to assist companies to grow quicker, which helps to solve our unemployment problem. To balance the loss in the reduction of corporate tax, the bill also includes review of initial allowances, penalties on late submission of PAYE, capping of losses carried forward, and the increase in the rate of withholding tax on interest for non-residents from 10 to 15%. In addition, government intends to introduce a tax on worldwide income for the residents of the Kingdom of Eswatini. It's envisaged that these tax measures will make the poor better off. Mr. Speaker, by virtue of the responsibility entrusted in me as a Minister of Finance, I now present to August House the budget estimates for the financial year 2022-2023. Revenue and grants, 19,359,410,870 emalangeni. Appropriated recurrent expenditure, 16,218,426,836 emalangeni. Appropriated capital expenditure, 5,362,450 emalangeni. Total expenditure, 23,162,383,197 emalangeni. The fiscal deficit ends up being 3,803,172,327 emalangeni. In conclusion, Honourable Speaker, I'd like to thank our local and international development partners who have supported us through thick and thin, especially through the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, in particular, I'd like to acknowledge the support we have received from the European Union, the Republic of China and Taiwan, the UN family, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, African Development Bank, International Fund for Agricultural Development, Export-Import Bank of India, Japan International Cooperation Agency, USAID, the Global Fund, the PEPFAR Fund, the Luke Commission, and civil society. I'd like to acknowledge the partnership and collaboration that the public sector enjoys with the private sector. Both of these sectors are critical for the development of our nation, and neither can succeed without the success of the other. We must continue to remove any boundaries that limit our global competitiveness or restrict the ease of doing business. Eswatini remains open for business because without investment and business, we cannot create jobs, we cannot grow our economy, and we cannot continue to protect the most vulnerable in society. His Majesty has called on all eMaswati to engage in the Sibaya to find the best way forward and ensure that the tragedies that we have experienced during the past year are never repeated. In order to achieve this, we need an all-inclusive process that will allow everyone to be heard. We need to reflect on our words and put aside our weapons. We need to focus on healing rather than hurting, reconciliation rather than conflict, and unity in directing our efforts towards common goals of peace and prosperity for a better life for all eMaswati. Transformation through economic sustainability means making the right long-term policy and then implementing it consistently over time. I wish to assure all eMaswati that there's renewed hope. Let me re-emphasize some of our successes. Our GDP growth has shown remarkable resilience with growth of 5.9% projected for 2021. Significant benefits of the successful implementations of the post-COVID recovery plan. We now have a 24-hour access to South Africa, our biggest trading partner. Significant increases in our customs union receipts over time, due to the measures that we've implemented. The commissioning of the Lucip Phase 2, introduction of a lifeline electricity to the most vulnerable, completion of the Manzini to KM3 International Airport Highway, improved cash flow leading to reduction in arrears, the shutting of the CTA trading account, moving from remeasurable contracts to lump sum contracts, which limits cost overruns on capital projects, spending within our budget, healthy reserves and a positive trade balance, and mining licenses that were issued. Mr. Speaker, all of these indicate a brighter tomorrow if we don't lose faith. Government is moving towards a more sustainable path. Lastly, I'd like to quote from a scripture from Joshua 1 verse 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, neither be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. I thank you, Honourable Speaker. Amen.
Bahlonishwa, iphela lapho indzaba ye-budget speech. Iphelile. It's for you now, bahlonishwa, ukuthi nibuye nambe niyoyikhulumisa njalo nginivile nje ngasikhwala kunthusako. So what does that mean? It means bahlonishwa sonke sithamukela inkundleni. Asiwathathe la document siyise enkundleni. Sihlale phasi sikhulumisane nabo. According to mastering orders to athi nginiketa langa then bese niyabuya. Ngitsiteke bahlonishwa cha kuze ukuthi sende umsebenzi lo nithi lo kahle. Asibuyeni ngelanga langa lesithathu lapho seniwafunze kahle senende kahle ema documents enike bahlonishwa nasiphuma sonke la sitawathola la eSenate batafike basinikete khona bahlonishwa then bahlonishwa ngobe sokuthama kapi lokhu manje asale ngivala kutoze ngoba ngathi umhlonishwa waseMochani wena njani cha bahlonishwa siyabonga kakhulu sisebenzile for today ngicela kusho ukuthi uma sibuya tonke tindvuna tibe ready to table my performance reports so that performance reports nalango ma bills afuna ukutablisha on Wednesday. So ngalawo la mafisha bahlonishwa cela umhlonishwa DPM ukuthi asigucisele lendlu ehloniphekile ibuye ihlale ngalesithathu mhla ka-23 2:30. Mhlonishwa DPM.
Angibonge Mr. Speaker sengiyashukumisa ukuthi indlu lehloniphekile isale iguqa lamhla iphindze ibuye itosebenza ngalesithathu mhla tingemashumi enyangeni ya February evikini letako. Ngiyashukumisa.
Bahlonishwa sekuphakanyisiwe ukuthi indlu ayiguce for today ibuye ihlale ngalesithathu igabence insimbi yesibili mhla ka-23 February. Those in favor should say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it, bahlonishwa, and the ayes have it. The House is adjourned.
Bokosi nembala sekethuliwe ke maphakele eminyaka wetimali wa 2022 induna yetemafa Neal Rijkenberg wathula lapha eParliament kaLobamba kanti ke ichazile induna sayicala inkulumo yayo eksenini yebo tikhona tinsaye letikhona letibhekene nelive letibhekene nesifunza lesibhekene ke neAfrica yonkhana kukufayikasi nemhlaba wonke indzaba nje COVID-19 nyona ndzaba mlonyeni letsikabeteke tindlela letiningi letsikabete tempilo yatsikabeta temfundo yatsikabeta nendzaba tetekutsengiselana lokujabulisa sibe kuyo emaphakelweni ukuthi litiko letemfundo lanalo litholile-ke imali lecishe lithole imali leningana nasingabuka eminyakeni lophelile lapho nakhona lathola imali kabhaka lo nyaka ngivile indvuna lokusenene naseyonke le mali yafika etigidzi letine temalangeni kathi nelitiko letempilo nanalo ngilelinye litiko leliphindze lathola futhi kathi-ke sitawuthi tifuna nje tindvuna sifuna nawo emalunga eParliament ekusenene kuva ukuthi ngabe reactathini kuyo inkulumo noma-ke kuwo lawo maphakelo siyawucala nje ngayo indvuna yetemfundo Lady Howard ngoba likhona ihlelo lengilivile ilisinza indvuna lencabanga ukuthi umuntu ongasisita kahle ngalo ngiyo indvuna yetemfundo Lady Howard sinagiyana emsibike leka qhubeka kone kusicelela yona indvuna Lady Howard sitawuva njalo ukuthi indvuna ithini kuyo le project nekusichazela nje lelihlelo lolusha indvuna ngiyo le ngosi indvuna engosi lekafishane nje indvuna siwathulile indvuna temafa emaphakelo ngive nelihlelo lelisha indvuna ikhuluma indvuna ibekuse ngabo A level sibabone kulamanye emave mhlawumbe ungasichazela nje kafishane indvuna ngalelihlelo bekhuluma ngalo Minister Finance.
Luhlelo lapho khona sifuna kufinyeta i-curriculum i-course ya secondary la khona sesifuna kuyenda ibe nge4 years khona batophuma labanye labaphumelela kulapho instead of 5 years bakhona kuhamba bayongena kuma skills mangena kuma A levels bangena kuma AS levels sitawuqala ngekupilota 28 schools sibone ukuthi kuyasebenzeka yini uma ngabe kuyasebenzeka we will move on and roll out to the rest of the schools.
Lo 28 schools ndvuna seninaye noma nizathola phansi phindza nimfune letifundza totine tele.
Sim identifyile seba engagewe nabo principal laba kuleto tikolwa konke nje kukahle kume ngemumo.
Iphindze indvuna yatsinza indzaba ye vocational ngiyakhumbula wike le wavakashela nasempaka ngabe liphiko lifuna kuliqinisa level betemfundo le.
Sifuna kuliqinisa kakhulu. Si realize ukuthi kwaba wrong ukuthi sibe sesiluthathela phansi lolu phiko luphiko lwetemakhono because umuntu lonelukhono angeke abulawe indlala so sesifuna ukubuyisela ke ngoba sesibonile ukuthi abantu abethu sihleti nabo kulama white collar jobs sesifuna ke ukuthi abantu siba equip ngema skills kuze batokhona ukuthi baphilise nalabanye kuma communities lebahleti kuwo ngoba umuntu oneskill uyakhona kumfundisa lo munye naye akhona ukuqhubeka atiphilisa.
Nengozi siyabonga isikhathi sakho. Lady Howard ngose lebe isichazela nje kakhulu ngalo lihlelo lebe lichaza indvuna yetemafa Rijkenberg ekuseneni litawusebenza kanjani isike indvuna bafuna kunciphisa lesikhathi lesisithathako ezikolweni yakhumbula ukuthi na ungena nje ka form 1 ekubheka ukuthi uyawuba ka form 5 sho sinyalo ke leminyaka seyitawufinyetwa siyabe sifuna ke naletinye indvuna letikhona la eParliament kuva nje ekuseneni ingabe nathi buka emaphakelo ahambe njani ukuthi ngabe vele kulawo ma sectors ato indvuna yini lebatabe bakuqinisa njoba indvuna yetemfundo nje sayitazeli kanti kukhona nanelisiwe endlangamandla lesinaye la lentamniketa nje naye ukuthi ngabe itsini reaction yakhe kula maphakelo lesicetsa kwabona.
Kanti ke mbukeli njengoba bese kashito umlingani ukuthi indvuna litiko letemafa Rijkenberg seyivele iwethulile emaphakelo kanti sibonile ukuthi litiko letemphilo lingilelinye lelilandzele ngekuthola imali njengoba lithole imali lenganga 2.42 billion emalangeni siyathi ke mbukeli ukuthi litiko letemphilo libhekane nemkhuhlane iCovid-19 kanti lenye indzaba leke yavela indzaba yawo drugs ukuthi kude kahle ama drugs amaphilisi etibhedlela sibonile litiko letempilo nayichaza indvuna yelitiko letemafa ithite litiko letempilo lisebenzisa imali lenganga 1 billion emalangeni kuthi ke isebende yona indzaba yemkhuhlane iCovid-19 kanti lokunye lokube khona litiko laka agriculture lona lithole imali lenganga lengetulu kwa 1 billion emalangeni lapho khona kumele libuke khona ukuthi live leSwatini ligcina lifika njani esigabeni sekuthi likhone ukuthi ikhicitela kudla lokwanele kanti lenye indzaba lengiyibona ngayo kakhulu indzaba yokuthi live selitawubuka ukuthi engabe tindzabeni te-tax i-tax ibhadalwa njani ibhadalwa ngibani ngibonile nje lapho beyichaza khona ukuthi kungathi laba hola imali lenganga 3.5 emalangeni bona ngeke basayikhokha mhlambe i-tax itawucala kulohola 4,000 emalangeni sibonile indvuna iphindze ikhuluma nge-corruption ukuthi i-corruption isesekhona eveni nekuthi kukhona lokutawendiwa njengoba i-Anti-Corruption Commission yona seyiniketwe imali lenganga 24 million emalangeni lapho khona itawubuka ukuthi icetha njani inkhohlakalo lapha eveni. Lenye indzaba levelile indzaba yekuholela bogogo lapho khona litiko la DPM liniketiwe imali lenganga 700 million emalangeni lapho khona litawubuka ukuthi engabe bogogo bona baholela kanjani. Siyethemba ke ukuthi ematiko asasebenta atawuqinisekisa ukuthi lokhu la kule budget kuyaphumelela. Lokunye lesikubonile i-Regional Development Fund yona inikiwe 177 million emalangeni kubuka phela tentuthuko kubuka kufakelwa gesi kubuka ukuthi sive siyawathola inemanti sive siba nawo inemabloho. Lenye indzaba lebe ivelile ka Regional Development Fund ukuthi eminyakeni lophelile bebaspende imali lenganga 95.6 million emalangeni kufika nje kuJanuary ukuthi live likhone ukuthi liphile. Siyethemba ke ukuthi indvuna ilitiko letemafa le budget leyithulile itawuba ngileyo legcina ukuthi mhlambe sive sikhone ukuthi sithuthuke. Kanti ke mbukeli sitawubuyela kuye LinkedIn Gule lotawuchubeka akhulumisane nendvuna yaka agriculture Jabulani Mabuza.
Nembala nilisiwe sevele ikhona indvuna yeteklima Jabulani Mabuza le sivile indvuna nakhona itsinza indzaba daga agriculture lokukhulu kakhulu la sijake khona indzaba ye food security. Indvuna nankala maphakelo seyiwathulile indvuna yetemafa niphakelo nani nibaka agriculture. Are you happy with the budget?
Kepha na uphakelwe ungahlala njani uthi awusiye happy ungamane kube ukuthi is it enough? Liqiniso ke lithi ingeke yahlala enough ingeke inele tidzingo ngoba phela inseko ukuthi siyasebenza siyadimisela kubambisa live endzabeni ukuthi live lingalamba.
Ndina ngosi indvuna isinze nenzaba yema dams ngiyakhumbula ngale indzaba leni sukumle kakhulu nilitiko ndachubeka inivele ni wagubhe even lonke indzaba yala ama dams.
Ema dams vele ngiyona mandate yethu lenkulu lesibhekene nayo njengoba uvile nje indvuna itsinza kwanyalo sibhizi elusipho kepha ke ilusipho seyiya ngemsha wendoda ke ngasekugcineni kwayo la le benefits seyi full scale. Nyalo ke sesibheka eshiselweni la kuthiwa khona kokumkhonvo ngwavuma lidam nalo lelikhulu lelidaba lendansi embakeni lelitawusita cishe yonke ishiselo vele le program yethu yokuthi akube nemadamu ngaphandle ke kwalomkhonvo ngwavuma kunemadamu ke lama small nema medium dams levele siphokophele ukuthi siwende sidabe sibhizi ngawo ke lang 16 asavele aqalile ayasetshenzwa njengoba sikhuluma nje ngefund lesayithola ka EU wona ke akakhulu kade ngalanga kubo Highfield ngoba kufuneka aphinze yabe nale downstream development lokuthi kube khona lokukhiqidwako la ngendansi. Lamanye ke madam sitawuchubeka siwakhe silitiko lamanye akhiwa ngeEswatini through le program lesimthume yona Eswatini vele sidabe sibhizi emascoop dams ke siwenda ke vele mhla yonke le nyalo nje sendela ngi12 kule period lesisuka kuyo sidabe sibhizi ngalamanye itarget ukuthi singendi la ngaphansi kwa 20.
Ngosi finally the subsidy program ivele indvuna itsinza nemali lesekayibekile ehulumende nanibuka nilitiko imphendvulo yini indzabeni ye food security kuleli.
Embelense itikhombisile timbawu ukuthi imphendvulo ngoba nale tinombolo talabalimi labangenela lo hlelo lwale subsidy program tiyenyuka umnyaka ngomnyaka. Nyalo nje itarget yethu ukuthi okungenani nakusihambele kahle kulomnyaka sifike ku 15,000 wema farmers langenela le program. Ngenxa yale program ngiyethemba sivile nje ukuthi umkhiqido embileni wenyukile, umkhiqido kuma fruits wenyukile, umkhiqido kuma vegetables wenyukile. Impact yale program siyibona inkulu kakhulu nalomdlandla lesubona emaswatini kuyingenela kusho ukuthi baya ngekurealize ukuthi uhulumende lapha ubambisana nesive uhlangabetana nebandla ngoba umlimi ukhipha ihalf bese uhulumende umfakela ihalf. So kuyinto lenkulu leyo nalesisita kakhulu kule program kwenyusa umkhiqido welive. Sijabula kakhulu ke ngala ma increase ikakhulu kade le ma fruits nje. Emaswati yakhicida kula ma programs abo isweti bo banana sesiyaba exporters bakhiphela ngaphandle. Kuyinvo lenhle leyo nalesikukhuthatako nalokuthi ke emaswati angabuyele emuva kule tindzaba tama vegetables ngoba lesikhathi sinalama lockdowns bani labanengi bayembakha into lama small gardens siyakukhuthata kakhulu lokuthi sichubeke ngemfutho kuze live libe nama vegetables lane.
Nkosi siyabonga sinifisela kusebenta lokuhle nelitiko.
Siyabonga kakhulu.
Nembala bonke sibeke indvuna yaka agriculture Jabulane Mabuza kanti ke nelisiwe ngithemba lothi unayo indvuna yaka commerce Mancoba Khumalo sitawuva ukuthi ngabe njoba nanabo sivile lokho ukuthi batholile imali kusibachubeke bakhe ama factory shells nelisiwe itsini indvuna yaka commerce.
Ngwanelo muhle sesivele sinayo indvuna yaka Commerce Industry and Trade Mancoba Khumalo. Honorable Minister esibonile ukuthi indvuna nayo ethula imaphakelo ichazile ukuthi kunema factory shells la tawuba khona kwangathi nibukane ukuthi ease of doing business vele kube ngileyo leseyithuthuka even la kaNgwane ngabe ungasichazela Honorable Minister ukuthi ni plana kwendani nyalo kude kuthuthuke tema business.
Sibonge kakhulu le budget speech indvuna yetemafa lecetha kuyithula siyabonga kakhulu ukuthi le budget speech iyabonakala ukuthi ilandzela lenkulumo yengwenyama lapho khona ingwenyama beyikhuluma ngabo somabhizinisi labancane nalabakhulu even ukuthi kufanele ukuthi bathuthuke. Silitiko ke la Commerce Industry and Trade siyajabula kakhulu ngale budget speech. Kwecala nje lesicela Paula ukuthi sehlisa i-corporate tax i-tax lebhadala bosomabhizinisi uma ngabe sebasebentile kwanyalo 27.5%. Indvuna ke temafa ithulile lapha ukuthi sifise ukuthi le corporate tax ibe 25%. Lokho kusho ukuthi bosomabhizinisi sebatawuqasha abantu labaningi ngoba seyitawusala imali ibe ngconywana lesalako ekhikhine uma sebabhadela umthelo. Sibonga naloko ukuthi ke letinhlelo tekusupporta bosomabhizinisi labancane letinengi njengoba itethulile indvuna tikhona kune revolving fund lekhona ka FinCorp ya 45 million labakhona ko bosomabhizinisi ku accessa kune informal traders fund lekhona ka FinCorp nayo labakhona ukuthi bayithole bosomabhizinisi labancane. Futhi ke siphinde sentana kulekuthiwa small scale guarantee scheme ukuthi sale sitholakala hayi emabhange kuphela kepha noma soya ka youth enterprise fund soya khona ukuthi usebenzise le mali yahulumende ibe ngiyona sibambiso utawukhona kuthola i-loan uyakhona kuya Setco bakusite kanjalo uyakhona kuya ka SIDC bakusite kanjalo uyakhona kuya ka FinCorp. Le small scale guarantee scheme asisesiso kuphela lesitholakala emabhange kepha sesitholakala nezindawo letiningi lapho khona mhlawumbe bosomabhizinisi labancane bangasitakala khona. Sibonga ukuthi ke kutawudaleka imisebenzi sitawuqhubeka sicedzele i-factory shell lesiyakha kokugamula sitakwakhala enye i-factory shell enzevane sitayicala masinyane sitakwakhala enye kumantambe nayo seyicalile kuma designs akhona asecophelele setulu sitawuphinde sakhe lenye futhi i-factory shell emagindaneni kulomgwaqo lo suka enhlangano yebugege lomusha lowakhiwako kutaba ne-factory shell lapho yaka Johnson letawuqasha abantu labanyenti. Sibuka ke ukuthi le budget sinesilitokola ka commerce lakhuluma ngayo minister vele iyasisita kuthuthukisa bosomabhizinisi iphinde isisite kudala umsebenzi. Siyabonga kakhulu.
Siyabonga kakhulu Honorable Minister Ngwanelo muhle bekuyindvuna yaka Commerce Industry and Trade kanti LinkedIn so vele umenayo indvuna yaka Public Service.
Yes nasiwe ikhona indvuna bukeke tisebenzi tembuso Mabulala Maseko Minister sivile indvuna yetemafa itsinza indzaba ye-wash bill kuhulumeni taqhubeka ayizamele ukuthi ayehlise kepha nje indzaba lenkulu esetiko lakho le indzaba mlonyeni kungimanje indzaba yekhola lesivile indvuna nayo i-addressa uthini kuma civil servants kule ndzaba yekhola.
Kungaba nje ukuqala kokuthi ngivusele sive semaswati ngivusele nama civil servants elive laseSwatini lapho khona la 40,000 a permanent la about 5,000 ngila temporary ngithi ke angwavusele onke ama civil servants engwenyama bese ngiyaveta kuleti tabokhola lengicabanga ukuthi indzaba letimnanzi labatatu ijabulela kungaba kuveta nje ukuthi uhulumende wetinkundla nguhulumende webantu, nguhulumende loqabangela sive seMaswati. Siyathi ukuthi sibuya esimeni lesimatima lapho khona bekune unrest. Tintfo letinengi tonakele kubhidlitwe emabhizinisi, kwabhidlitwe ama-structures ahulumende, ufake ekhathi nemigwaqo. So salahlekelwa ke imali letinengi, salahlekelwa imisebenzi leminengi. Kusho ukuthini-ke kuhulumende lo? Kusho ukuthi ama-taxes langena kuye abesancipha. Kepha uhulumende uthite noma ngaseyishayile i-unrest, ishayile na-COVID. Kepha tisebenzi tahulumende akube khona leti kutholako lokutawumane kukhushine le miholo yabo kulesikhathi lesi. So imali enganga 300 million ivele kwathiwa nje itawubheka kuma civil servants. Lapho khona 220 million utawubuka khola. Bese kuthi 60 million utawubuka ema-appeals. Seng 20 million utaba atsinza tindzaba te-salary review. Lengicabanga ukuthi ema-civil servants kuyathokothisa kakhulu kwathi sekuthi i-salary review bekufanele ngayendiwe ku-last financial year. But-ke ngalesimo lebesikhona eveni sekubabete kwetimali. Nako konke nje lokwasekuyendeka kwenda ukuthi kungachubeki kahle, but-ke this financial year tintfo ngifuna ukuthi ku-next financial year tintfo titawuhamba kahle kuma-civil servants batawujabulana na.
Siyabonga kakhulu.
Siyabonga.
Indvuna yetisebenti tembuso bongosi indvuna Mabulala Maseko nembala lokukhulu abatakujabulela vele tisebenti tembuso ngiyo indzaba yemaholo nangabe ke seyikhona imali lengaleyo 300 million leseyibekiwe kuthi iyawucunzana naleti indzaba lethi sesemba yokusenini nalawo usithi indvuna kuthi kuyawhlalwa ematafuleni kukhunyiswane ibuyela indzaba ibuyela eParliament ekhunyiswane sesemba leyo kuthi iyawuhamba ngendlela yakhona bongosi live libuyele lisimame kanti ke sitawuqhubeka nje sifunye letinye tindvuna ikhona nje indvuna yetinkundla ikhona indvuna yaka sports lena nayo ichaziwe indzaba yebamhlabasha kuthi ikhona tikhwama tahulumende tiningi lekufuneke batisebenzise ikhona indzaba yena khona lechubekako nekuthi eminyakeni kusuka kuJanuary into sitawufika ingase eminyakeni ophelile nje January until lo January simqedzako iphumele imali engaka 95 million emalangeni ku-RDF siyawufuna ke kuyithola indvuna David Cruiser ngamphalala kuthi react naye ukuthi imali bayingetile ngethemba nelisiwe so vele unayo indvuna yetinkundla David Cruiser ngamphalala.
Kanti ke ngwanelo muhle sesivele sinayo indvuna yelitiko letinkhundla nekuthuthukiswa kwato indvuna David Ngamphalala sivile na ikhuluma indvuna yelitiko letemafa ukuthi iRDF ithole imali lenganga 177 million letawusebenta khona ndvuna engabe le mali lena italisita kangakanani litiko kuthuthukisa impilo yaso sive seMaswati.
Ayisithi litiko le mali yokusita eMaswati. Yimali yokuthi eMaswati aqale sibe nokucabanga lokungcono singathi sibuke idola ngisho ukuthi kukabi sathi sifaka abo gas sifaka abo furnace senda in sithi ke thina liso lethu ake liphinde libuke kwi-income generation ukuthi le mali lena ingayisita kanganani liSwati kuqosha kati etiko kungako ke njengoba ikhulunyiswa nebahlonishwa ngiyabeva bonke baresponda ukuthi sokukhulunywa nge-RDF eMaswati asayamati leticela ukuthi awuthi bhememe tibe tinengi sekufuna ke nyalo sibe nendlela ukuthi uma ngabe kumbe inkundla ngiyabekisa ithi 1.5 million akube yimali ye-income generation lelenye ibukela ama-project lamanye labevele akhona lokho kutawusita ukuthi kulisite live kubasite eMaswati kuqosha kati etiko at the same time ngoba lokho sesifundise sesifundisile ngalena leticelo titaba tinkulu asibuyele phela lemiphakathi ukuthi bekunene noma sesifundisiwe enkundleni ngiyabekisa sina 1.5 million utawubuka income generation singaphiki kwemukela bathi bekudlalwa ngabo then lo uma ngabe lenkundla ithi no lo 3 million onke asemfaka kwe-income generation kutaba ngilenkundla singaphiki ukuthi nje sekuvulekile konke yes kuvulekile but kufundisa umuntu ukuthi bekunene sina 3 million sesifisa singilenkundla ukuthi sithathe ngoba nyalo tawubale ticelo tithi mbo kuthi bekudlalwa ngahamba ufundise athi lo muntu ukuthi inangi yethu i-target yethu lesinayo kule mali nge3 million asisebendeleke siyinkundla nemiphakathi mangabe sikhuluma nge-income generation sigcile ukuthi ngilo 3 million singabe sesithi sina 5 million lathathu lo muntu uyangilutha ngoba lokumqoka kumuntu kumtshela iqiniso nolwazi ukuthi nayi le mali lengaba khona ketha ke sonke ukuthi ku5 years uyithatha ngalabo 3 million it's almost 15 million sesingakwathi ke ukuthi no sikubekele lesikhathi sonke sathi tawusitha kubede ukukhuluma ngoba savula nje hawu sekumenyethiwa sivule eyalalayo tawujika futhi ukukhulunywa hawu bebadlalanga no let's work uma usebenda ngebudget lonikwe yona nenkundla uma tawusebenzisa lo 3 million ikhulume nebantu kubudget lanikwe yona kude umsindo lo taba khona ngoba lo muntu utabe asathi ukuthi enkundleni sebamthethe 1.5 million kusele 1.5 million lo 1.5 million maphela simela another year kona singasho ukuthi lokuvuleka sitawuthandaza sicela ukuthi ikhule le mali umqoko lokho ngoba emaswati vele asayati ukuthi besingeke sibe netinkinga emathuba emisebenzi uma singasebenzisa lesikhwama lesikahle sekuvakala.
Sibonge kakhulu Honorable Minister Mbukeli loyo bekuyindvuna yetinkhundla Administration and Development David Ngamphalala chaza kahle ngesikhwama se-Regional Development Fund kanti ke LinkedIn kule sovele umenaye umhlonishwa wakhe umhlonishwa Musa Kunene.
Ukuthi indzaba yemgwaqo siqinusa lokubheka ke bonhlangano ibe indzaba mlonyeni kakhulu eParliament lokujabulisayo ukuthi uhulumende wagijima wayayisebenzisa lendzaba umgwaqo yaphuma imali ukuthi wakhiwe ithi Minister Finance ukhulumile ngale mgwaqo nebumcoka bemigwaqo yaseshiselweni kuyithuthukisa sinemhlonishwa wakhe Musa Kunene lophinza bengusihlalo we-Public Accounts Committee. Mhlonishwa, I want you to react kwecala bumcoka bemigwaqo yaseshiselweni ukuthi uhulumende uyayikhipha imali ekuthenini le migwaqo ilungiswe.
Angikubingelele magobana Ndlovu sibonge kakhulu ne budget speech yendvuna Minister of Finance. According to myself it was balanced. Kakhulu ke ngingene endzabeni loyithinza ukuthi sishiselo mawubuka kuwo wonke la region singilenye region lesele kakhulu in terms of infrastructure and development. Mawubuka abantu bakithi bonke ba migrate bakubo Spiki bakuTselibonjeni bakumanzini because development has been coming so slowly. Sinzeka kakhulu magwabane si region kuna unrest bese sibosobona inhlangano bese yita but it was scattered down. But nje magabane siyathemba ukuthi le fund leyalontsho sibayini tawuphinde bosomabhizinisi mesibakiseshisweni labalimalelwa itawuphinde ibuye infrastructure ikhulu inhlangano ngabe sesiyibona seyita ngale speed beyita ngaso bosobona ukuthi no sofika edrobheni noma sofika enhlangano akusesi village or small town. But in terms of infrastructure siyabonga kakhulu iminister ngabe hulumende laba leader hulumende bakubona ukuthi vele khwabe ngende kahle eshiselweni magwabane mawusikhuma liqiniso umgwaqo lobo ukhona weTharoding lobo suke egatini kuSouth kaManzini because lo suke enhlangano uvaye kubo Sluthi Ntjintja yathi. That's the only two road the tight in a region. So ke saba nenhlanhla lembi nanangwagege wathi yaqala wase sewuyema for some years 2013 to 2022. However siyabonga endvuneni and sibonga nelive la sibonge bahlonishwa sibonge iPAC sibonge iMinister of Works ikakhulu iPAC lokwathi sekubonakele ukuthi sekulukhuni sekude tonke izinto yazama for the first time in history yazama iPAC ukuthi cause indaba sobothi lenzaba ayisabonakala idirection sekude sibona nelive ukuthi lidi imali but nje sibonga likhambi ukuthi ayithola sine PAC sine PS waka economic planning finance netinkhundla sahlala phasi then sisi proposal le triple PP le business partnership le lapho khona kwakudingeka ukuthi kuze ukuthi kuqhubeke le project ya inhlangano siqinusa kwase kudingeka somabhizinisi noma icontract lethi mine ngingawakha lo mgwaqo wami. I think it's the second project lelanzana lele kulukhula Big Band
Ntjintja, I'm sorry to cut you short. Siyabonga kakhulu isikhathi sakho. Kunendvuna lesitawugcina ngayo nje indvuna yaka sports kafishane nje sithola umuntu singakavali John Perez. Just 2 minutes of your time, John. Minister, thank you so much for joining us here. Minister of Finance uyithinzele indzaba yebantfu labasha lesetiko lakho. Ngiyathi nyalo bekunemsebenzi esifiki lobovula ukusibukede kabusha le youth policy. What are you saying to young people in the kingdom?
Well, there is a little bit of hope, particularly for the youth empowerment side of things, because the ministry is very broad. We've got youth empowerment issues, we've got sports issues, we've got arts and culture issues. So on the youth empowerment, there is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Young people can have hope because and another 12 million has been allocated for the Youth Enterprise Revolving Fund, where young people who want to become entrepreneurs can put in applications, and if they are this, then we'll support them financially with startup capital, and then they can employ themselves. And as the business grows, we hope that they'll be employing other young people out there. And you spoke about a project or a workshop that we had earlier on in the week. We are looking at various ways of empowering the youth. So we want to fully operationalize the National Youth Policy, which we drafted in 2020. We've been creating an operational plan. We've identified some pillars, education, where we want to improve skills for the young people so that they can be employable. At the same time, we're looking at making sure that they are included in all sectors of our livelihood in the country. They participate in social issues. They are taken care of in terms of health, particularly sexual reproductive health, and they also participate in the economy. So the policy has got a number of pillars. And then on the sporting side, as much as we are slightly disappointed that no allocation was made for the construction of an international standard FIFA stadium, we're still hopeful that as we continue knocking on the door, the economists who decide on the budget and the country's priorities will be able to heed our call. It's high time that such a facility is built, but we won't be sitting and crying or weeping because we don't have that allocation at the moment. We've received funding, about 4 million, that we'll be using to go around all the constituencies and communities, putting up some playing surfaces, what we can call open sports grounds, so that young people can be busy playing football, netball and other sports, keeping themselves busy. And also we'll be using part of the allocations to identify talent that will then be nurtured until it reaches elite level, and eventually those people we expect to basita kuma international games.
Minister, siyabonga kakhulu isikhathi sakho.
Thank you so much.
Ngokosibe kunye kwendvuna temidlalo nendzaba tebantfu labasha Harris Bulunga. Siyafuna ke kuvala na Nelisiwe la umsebenzisi wendekile bonkosi la eParliament indvuna temafa sewafulile ke emaphakelo eminyaka timali wa 2022-2023. Overall I think onke matiko ajabulile ngaloko lakutholile sivile health kakhulu kade nakutemfundo. Ngiyajabulela Nelisiwe indzaba yatemfundo nje kafishane sesivala ekuthenini lo 5 years lebe simcisa ehle aye kulo 4 years.
Yindzaba lenhle kakhulu leyo LinkedIn lokunye lengikujabulelako kutemfundo ukuthi uhulumende unanangu 439 million lotawubuka kakhulu tindzaba temfundo uphindze kube na 361 million lathide uhulumende yena utawubuka nje tindzaba te scholarship nje kuphela bese nasiya etiko la DPM lapho khona sibuka tenhlala kahle over 700 million lapho LinkedIn hulumende lambekile kusita bona abantu labadzala lethide indvuna bayenza la kubo 75,000 nje eminyakeni lophelile lebe bahola yona imali yabo gogo. Siyabona ukuthi uhulumende impela usuke eligonso uyasebenta, siyathemba nje ukuthi ngakapheli lo mnyaka awu lonke elile impela.
Bokose asatsenza budget systemics eMovember bane John Perez.
Sibonga kakhulu kule magwabane eParliament kanye ke nemlingani wami nguNelson Wenhlangamandla laba bambeke intsambo eParliament. Sibonga kuhamba kahle ke komsebenzi kulo lonke ke libamdla lelisibambisile ke eParliament. Majali bekathebula ke titfombe nabo bonke labende ukuthi lo msebenzi uhambe kahle. Ma reactions siyaweva kutoke tindvuna tembuso. Ngikhumbula ke ngeminyaka wamaphakelo wetimali weminyaka wanga 2019 2020 lapho khona silo semhlaba ingonyama enkosi Mswati wesithathu uyacela yagcizelela mayivula ke iParliament kwekuthi emaphakelo lekentiwako aseka kamanye abuke lokuthi entelwa kwema resources la available yini ikakhulu kati ke kwakubuka lokuthi kuteke sive masithi mahle lamaphakelo sibe sikhulumela tiko maphakelo lesadiko vele lokuthi kukhona mbamba ebhodweni ngilelo diko litase liyabelwa ngidayikhulumisa ke nema economists lengihleti nawo ke studio because I think this is still very fundamental in terms of what this budget means. Do we have the resources? Does this really mean to the aspirations of His Majesty the King in terms of allocating resources that are available so that they meet the needs that are available on the ground? We shall take a quick break and we will be back in a short while.
Standard Bank. It can be. It all begins with a dream. Even in the middle of a pandemic, when so much has been lost and many hopes and dreams deferred, we still believe that new dreams can be realized. Even in tough times, hope can heal even the deepest wounds and see our country, its people, and the youth live to dream again. Because we believe that every great journey begins by taking that very first step. We invested 75,000 in Malangeni towards making sure that over 200 pairs of small feet can wear shoes to school and be allowed to chase their dreams. Because we believe in fueling tomorrow's dreams today, we invested 150,000 in Malangeni towards supporting the Junior Achievement National Program and the Enactus Program in 2021. Because we believe a healthy nation is a nation destined for greatness. On International Women's Day, 8 March 2021, we opened the door to a fully refurbished, COVID-compliant ward for our mothers, our sisters, and our daughters. We invested 1.5 million in Malangeni in collaboration with the Resource Mobilization Committee towards the rehabilitation of the Raleigh Fitkin Memorial Female Ward. Because we believe that the future is in our hands and the wealth is in our soil, we are helping train women and the youth to realize their dreams. 500,000 in Malangeni was invested towards the purchase of 4 farming tunnels for the innovative Tunnel Agri Project in partnership with the Women Farmer Foundation and the United Nations. Because when we rebuild together, we can thrive even better than yesterday. We invested 9,000 facial masks to 4,500 students and teachers in 8 community schools. Sewing machinery to young female entrepreneurs as well as welding tools and equipment to the School for the Deaf. All in partnership with the Royal Eswatini Sugar Corporation. Since 1998, Eswatini has banked on us to fulfill her dreams. Eswatini is our home, and because you can dream, you help us drive her growth. Together, Standard Bank. It can be. Wherever your dreams take you, we can make it easy for you to take care of those you left behind.
Alo?
Hey mkhulu.
Musa unkosi yami mfana wami nguwe.
Ukufolile lokuncane.
Lokuku?
Wona mkhulu kulapha ecingweni.
Aso ubuke lapha uthi lo mnakeni ukhona la kufakile lokuncane la licingweni.
Na imali mkhulu uyitfumelele nga unayo.
Awu ngiyabonga kakhulu mfana wami. Buka phela sengisitile le mali sengidawubhadalela lo dzathe wenu lesikolweni.
Nga unayo ungakhokha imali ku-ATM, uthenge gesi noma i-airtime, uphinze ukhone kubhadala nga-scan to pay. There you have it, the Unayo app. Balisela Unayo lomuhla mahala ha. Facata *334# or download the Unayo app via the Play Store, the App Store, or the Huawei app gallery. Standard Bank. It can be. Standard Bank. It can be. Can be.
Sinamukela maswati akithi emsakadweni EswatiniTV sihletike sihlatiya ke maphakelo ke imali icetha ke kwethula ke indvuna yetemafa umhlonishwa Neal Rijkenberg siyawakhumbuta ke maswati ukuthi umhlonishwa Neal Rijkenberg bese kukwesine ke ethula ke maphakelo njengoba sathi lokho ukuthi njalo njengeminyaka indvuna yetiko ke letemafa yethule ke maphakelo kune consistency let's see it in terms of what he does when he delivers his budget estimates for the current financial year, which is the year 2022-2023. He never forgets to quote certain scriptures relevant to situations that we may be going through as a country, whether socially or politically or economically. And he has quoted Joshua 1 verse 10 or Joshua 1 verse 9 a couple of times now. And of course, I think this year simbonile ke umhlonishwa Rijkenberg athatha ke ku Psalms 23 lapho khona ke kukhuluma ukuthi ke Jehova ungumalusi wami angiyokweswela. And I think this talks to us as a country. Emaswati ayakhumbula ukuthi imali yethu ikhuluma ngokuthi ke God is our source. Lokusho ukuthi noma ngabe sitaw achieve ini on the economic basket, we all also derive that from God himself. Sinakakene ukuthi ke maphakelo alonyaka eteke umehluko lomkhulu kangakanani in terms of the overall allocations and expenditure. Njengoba ke bekeme ku 24 billion last year, and this year we see the same margin or the same allocation in terms of what our Honorable Minister Rijkenberg. And I think these are the revenue allocations for the past financial year, where revenue and grants stood at 19.45 billion. Appropriate revenue expenditure stood at 15.8 billion. Kanzi ke masibuka kulomnyaka revenue and grant stands at 19.35 billion emalangeni. So yabona lo mehluko ukuthi awusiwo ke mehluko ke longakanani. Kanzi ke appropriate expenditure yalonyaka ithi 16.2 billion. Kanzi ke eminyaka lophelile beyithi 15.8 billion. Capital expenditure yayinconywana kulomnyaka lophelile njengoba ke indvuna yapha ke yakhipha ke ya-allocate ke 6.37 billion ku capital expenditure kanzi yehlile lonyaka yaba ke ngo 5.3 billion emalangeni. I'll speak to the gentleman in the studio in terms of finding out the impact of reducing allocations on our capital expenditure. Total expenditure last year stood at 24.4 billion emalangeni with a fiscal deficit of 4.6 billion emalangeni. This year's fiscal deficit stands at 3.8 billion emalangeni, and I think there's some form of fiscal prudency when you look at the reduction in the fiscal deficit. And I will also ask the economists and the financial analysts in the studio to help us understand and appreciate what it means when we have a fiscal deficit that has decreased from 4.6 billion emalangeni to 3.8 billion emalangeni. Dr. Chongwa, welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us throughout the session. Dube Nyamatane, thank you so much for staying with us throughout the session. We've got a couple of issues that we need to discuss, and which I think we have extracted from Neal Rijkenberg's speech, Minister of Finance. And I think one of those issues that are critical for us to discuss are some of the issues you were speaking about earlier. Inzabaya Nyamatano wakhuluma lana singakangena eParliament ukuthi economic activity is not as robust as it used to be in the past 3, 4, 5 years, especially after COVID-19. Now we see the Minister of Finance saying pay as you earn will now start at 4,000, not longer at 3,500 emalangeni, excuse me, no longer at 3,500 emalangeni. What do you make of this? What is it intended to do as a strategic instrument in the budget?
Thank you, John. First of all, I'll say this was just a very wonderful budget speech. On what you are asking, I'll say the reason for raising the cap kuthi isuke ku 3.5 iye ku 4,000 emalangeni kusita ukuthi lona lo thola lokuncane nakuphela inyanga ibe inengana imali la sabanayo nakuphela inyanga, so yangasathexeki kakhulu. Ngalamanye mavi le budget speech inako kumbonelela umuntu ukuthi ku-understanda lesimo lesesishintshile njengoba into setikhuphukile. So it's a good move to the people labahola kancane. It's very unfortunate to the high earning guys who are earning more than 300,000.
Sorry, Nyamatane, there were loud cries in Parliament when the minister eventually said, pay as you earn for those who earn 3,500 emalangeni will no longer be applicable, but it will now start at 4,000 emalangeni. Le ndlu imile esikhashana indvuna kwafuna ukuthi vele ime njengoba kube khona lokukhala lokube khona eParliament. Why do you think that was necessary when eMaswati labekahola kancane bekakhameka? Who is this cap supposed to affect really at the end of the day?
Okay, maybe I misinterpreted. Understanding yami ukuthi bakhaliswa ukuthi uthi de labahola ngetulu kwa 300,000 yakhuphuka tax from 33% to 35%. I will echo his statement nasathi I know it might be hitting us on all of us here in this house. So my understanding was to the upper bracket on lo msindvo lobekhona in the Parliament. I didn't think it was for the person
for the pay as you earn bracket.
Yes, who is yeah.
All right. Maybe you may want to support us, Dr. Chongwa. When we decrease pay as you earn for the low income earners, especially those earning 3,500 and below, they will not be affected. What does it mean? But what does it also mean from a consumption perspective for those who earn 4,000 and above? The tax itself has not been increased in terms of the income tax, appropriation to it. But for those that were not being taxed from the 4,000 upwards, but they will now be taxed. What does this really mean?
First of all, it's a good initiative which government has decided to revise the tax regime. Basically, it's a responsive tax regime because of the poverty gap, which was basically also fueled as a result of the social unrest, where we saw more than 8,000, if I'm not mistaken, jobs having been lost plus. So having increased from 3.5 to 4, it stimulates consumption, and consumption stimulates production, of which in the long run it is going to stimulate the national revenue again. So what we are basically talking about, that in as much as it might affect the issue of deservings, in a short and mid term, it benefits an average Leswati who might be struggling in terms of having a sustainable disposable income, especially those who were in the lower bracket in terms of earning. Also, the budget has told us that there are various projects which government has put in place which are going to have a ripple effect on job creation. So if we've got plus 6, maybe 1,000 jobs created, for example, and this plus 6,000 jobs created, they are earning slightly below 4,000, which means we are empowering the majority to have enough money in their pockets and meet their social economic demands.
Yeah, and just a quick one, Yamatane. You are mostly concerned about some of these financial indicators on a daily basis. The minister did mention that our inflation will remain stable in this current financial year, say maybe to about 3.5%. Is this realistic? If you look at the pressures on food, fuel, and many of those critical areas?
I think they will have to revise their modeling. I don't think that is true. Just my own perspective, to be frank. I think if you look at South Africa, where we get most of our food, the inflation rate that tells you, I don't think it makes sense to be much below where you get your food from. So I think our inflation figures, maybe they need some checking there and verification, but we can accept them because maybe they will say they've statistically proven the figures and economically. But based on our analysis, I think the inflation rate will rise. I'll just fundamentals are telling me if the price of fuel is rising as it is rising, it basically means that transfers to the food that you buy. And if we're talking about what he talked about, the issue of a fuel levy as a bill that he's going to push in Parliament of 30 cents, that also adds to the fuel levy. So that basically means there's going to be a hike in the fuel price, the general price. The farmer who's using a tractor, I'll just narrow it down to the man on the street. The farmer who's using it as a tractor will transfer that to the final product. The poultry farmer who buys food that has been produced by the tractor that has transferred the cost definitely will pass it on to the final product. So I think the inflation rate is going to rise, and globally inflation is rising.
Is it because of inflation that we are seeing that 30 cents increase on the fuel levy, Dr. Chongwa, or the minister is sort of deciding or deriving or creating a new avenue for revenue for the country?
To some degree, it's a precautionary measure which is being taken. If, let's say, for example, let's think the other way around. If there was no levy put in place with regards to fuel, for example, and then over suddenly we have got a global shock, which is a bullwhip effect, then what are we going to do? So basically, we must also look at it from a precautionary perspective. In the event that the global inflation rate increases by X percentage, we might not be hit because we already have a certain percent which we have put in place as a cushion or precautionary measure. The biggest challenge we have is when we've got what we call exogenous effects which are not planned for, especially on consumables like fuel. Those unplanned for exogenous effects, they create a lot of social havoc. But if government puts in place precautionary measures, at least to me, a cent is better than
not doing or putting money aside.
If they had put, for example, R1, it would have been too much again. So if they consider to put a 0 point, Lilangeni, is much better than if they had put a huge figure as a precautionary measure. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nyamatana. When we come back after this clip, I would want you to explain in real terms what this 30 cents means to the consumer in terms of the fuel levy. Ingabe itheni ngonyama inkosi Mswati wesithathu mayivula ke iParliament lonyaka ngenza baye ukuthi sinake kumbe indlela lesisebenzisa ngayo letimali noma lesaba ngayo letimali na indlela kumbe policies ethu lemengakhona kuqinisa kumbe letinhlangothi temnotho njengoba ke kubonakala ukuthi bekunabo COVID-19, and we are doing this so we can see if the minister did touch on issues of fiscal prudency in his remarks.
The country experienced a significant shortfall in the collection of revenue compared to the previous years, which was witnessed by many other countries across the globe.
Nasikhathanisa neminyaka leyedlule ikoleke lokuncane kakhulu etimalini telive lokuyibo lehlele wonke umhlaba bekunene.
Rearranging our priorities is the challenge that we shall continue to grapple with in the medium term. There's no other route to sustainable development.
Uhlelembisa kabusha tidingeko tethu ngiyona nsayele sitayibhekana nayo kwesikhashana kule minyakana ngoba kude ijikane khona lentuthukweni lekonsile bekunene.
During 2022, there will be a focus on improving information management on fiscal database in all spheres of government, as well as further improvements in fiscal policy to ensure effective collection of tax and non-tax revenue.
Kulomnyaka wa 2022 kutaba nekunakisisa ekusebenziseni nasekuphatheni kangcono kwelwati lokuthi imali tahulumende kumele tisebenze njani nekuthi tente ini kuto tonke tingoni tahulumende siphindze silungisise imigomo yetimali eveni kude kukolekeke kahle imithelo netimali tahulumende bekunene.
Ingonyama yenkosi Mswati wesithathu ikonzisa ukuthi ingabe lo nyaka kutawufuneka ukuthi leti mali indvuna ilitiko letemafa lekhulume ngato ke namuhla tabiwe njani tisetshenziswe njani kube ngimaphi lama priority areas. Nyamatani ubone kungimaphi indvuna ama priorities lewatsinzako njengoba ke Ngonyama ivetile lokuthi we need to rearrange our priorities. Do we see or did we see this in the minister's speech?
To me the budget speech is sibukeka sing less ordinary noma sing lebetinato eminyakeni lephelile. Angiyiboni le budget speech I react fast to ipandemic lesuka kuyo ye COVID-19 nale political unrest. However, kunema sectors lawa shito lengicabanga ukuthi abonakala ukuphendvula kuloko kodwa I feel maybe bekungaba ngcono kwendekelo kunye. One of the sectors I think le remain critical issue ye unemployment kubantu labasha. Uyakhuluma ngemisebenzi letawuvuleka nakwetiwadi inkampani nalapha nalapha. There's quite a lot labakushoko kusita abantu labasha, but nje ngiyafisa lokhu ukuthi ngabe le misebenzi lokwakheka kwayo kutawuthatha isikhathi lesinganani ngoba labantu bethu umsebenzi lo sikhuluma nawe John. Kude lo msebenzi nyalo itawuba khona nini le msebenzi lokuthi basheshe bayithola. I feel that sector ibe agent kokuthi ibe netinvo letisheshe tisotheka abantu bakhona kusitakala.
Ngalokuthi ke ngemibono amaswahla amahle sikhulumisa lokho ukuthi vele mbambamba njengoba Ngonyama ivetile lokuthi we need to rearrange our priorities, and I think one of the key issues that is affecting the kingdom of Eswatini at the moment is about unemployment. And I think when we ask these questions we are probing or asking them with a view to say, is this budget speaking to this fundamental unemployment need we have in the economy? Kanti ke lenye Ngonyama levetile ke mayivula iparlamente lonyaka indzaba yekulimala kwemigwaqo ne infrastructure even like in particular imigwaqo, and I always view imigwaqo as an economic tool or as an instrument of the economy. Kulimala kwayo ngabe kusho kuthini ithinzile yini indvuna indzaba infrastructure nekuthi lapho kulimele khona kutawende kanjani?
However, concerned about the negative impact that the above normal rainfall has had on our roads and bridges, causing an inconvenience to our motorists and all road users. They have also affected the structures of people's homes.
Ukhathatha kwethu ngiko nje kuthi letimvula letichuluka ngalokungakavami tinemithelo lomubi emigwaqweni nasemabhlowini elive uphinde khinyabete bonke bashayeli betimoto nebasebenzisi bemigwaqo letimvula tendlule tabanga umonakala nosemakhaya ebantfu bekunene.
The estimated cost to repair damages caused thus far is in excess of 150 million emalangeni. We can assure the nation that government and its agencies have developed a comprehensive maintenance and rehabilitation program to restore normality as soon as reasonable possible.
Bekunene lo monakalo bangwe timvula ulinganisele emalini lengako etigidzi netilikhulu nemashumi lasihlanu semalangeni. Sive singasiniketa siqiniseko ukuthi hulumende nawo bonke lasebenzisana nabo sebaluhlanganisile luhlelo lokulungisa kanye nokuvusetela takhiwe letilimele kude kuthi kusebenta kubuyele kube ngilokufanele esikhatsini lesifishane.
Ingonyama ke nakhona iveta lolunye ihlangothi lokungafuneka ukuthi ke lobukwe emakwentiwa ke lamaphakelo yaveta lokho ukuthi singazuthi kuvele sekunemali ke lekhishiwe. Did we see a reflection of these remarks from His Majesty the King? And I know most of the time we look at the issue of damaged roads from a social and political perspective, you know, but why are roads always a priority for an economy, Dr. Chongwa?
John, more than 70% of Eswatini populace is based in the rural areas. And basically, if you look at the last year's budget, there was actually a deliberate increase of a rural development fund so that we can stimulate entrepreneurship, productivity, which connects the supply chain to the urban areas. And so prioritizing the road network system, especially between the rural and the urban areas, is a strategic economic development. And looking at the fact that 67%, if not mistaken, is government exports. And the Honorable Minister of Finance emphasized that one of the priorities of economic development for Eswatini is to stimulate to become export-driven. So, and also if you look at the budget, places much emphasis on the entrepreneurship development. In as much as it did not come out more prominent on the element of how they are going to promote rural entrepreneurship, it also connects, of which hopefully perhaps there are certain structures which will be put in place to stimulate the two.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chongwa. Ikhulumile ke kakhulu ingonyama nangendzaba yama capital ivetile ke ingonyama maswati amahle nangendzaba yama capital projects bengike ngaveta la sibuka ke umehluko ukuthi kule financial year lesendlule kiyo 2021-22 was about 6 billion emalangeni kulomnyaka ke yehlile le mali ithi 5.3 billion emalangeni. What does this really mean? But we also want to connect what the Minister of Finance put in his budget compared to the sentiments of His Majesty the King relating to the capital projects allocation this year.
In order to create an enabling environment for our kingdom to develop, government needs to budget for capital projects.
Kude sikhone kusukumisa indzawo levumako yalombuso wethu ukuthi uthuthuke. Hulumende kumele aphakele imisebenzi lemikhulu netakhiwo.
These include, but not limited to, infrastructure development, such as road construction, provision of potable water, dams for irrigated agriculture, health facilities, energy factory shelves, and others.
Loku kufaka ekhathi kepha kungagcini ngekuthuthukisa kwemisebenzi yentuthuko lefaka ekhathi kwakhiwa kwemigwaqo kutholakala malula kwemanti kwakhiwa kwemadamu ekunisela kutekulima takhiwo tetempilo bukhona bagezi emahulumba ekhicitela nalokunye lokunengi.
Igcizelele kakhulu ke ngonyama yemaswati ngenza kwabiwa kwetimali noma kumbe ukuthi energy noma ke focus yelive iye kakhulu ke kusukumisene ke imisebenzi nyamatane. Why are capital projects a priority even for His Majesty the King? And as I have already mentioned, we saw a reduction in the allocation of capital projects from about 6 billion to 5.3 billion emalangeni. Does this speak to what we hope to achieve, and why, like for instance, I'm asking, why is it important that we prioritize a better allocation to capital projects?
Ngiyabonga John. Angicale kuhlanganisa inkulumo engonyama ngihlanganise nekukhuluma ne-budget speech kumbe ngakafiki lokho. Ngibona i-budget speech ikukhonile kukuhlanganisa noma ke kuku-addressa lokho engonyama. Na ubuka ukuthi ukhulumile minister ngendzaba yemigwaqo. Wakhuluma ngama-factory shares like wako, wakhulunywa ngama-clinic like wako, ngiyabona be-A4 la khulume ngawo. Lokuyinvo lekhomba ukuthi uya-addressa netindzaba ngiyakhumbula khulunyile ngemadamu lekuthi bantu bakhona kunisela. So kuyinvo leboneka i-addressa. Ema-capital projects la kumcoka khona ngokuthi ayingomba yekuthuthuka live empelweni ngona akhona ukuthi ukukhiciteke kukhicitwe ngawo. Nangakhuluma ngathi kufana ne-investment yelive, kufana ne-investment ngoba i-investment yenda kusukhona kukhicita noma ngawukho khona but kukwakhele imali. So lama capital projects enda lokuthi lelive likhona kusebenteka kuko. Angibekise njengoba ngeke nakhuluma ngemigwaqo. Imigwaqo nangabe seyigcwele ama potholes kusuke ngwenya nje ngiyabekisa kuze kuyofika kumathapha. Sengiyadibuta ukuthi mangakhe malola tawuvuka vuma kusuke eJozi ayele kumathapha la kugcwele ama potholes khona. So nangabe nomgwaqo wakheke kahle konke ukuthi nalabo labafuna kwenda kuthengiselana nelive laseSwatini babuke ukuthi kuyinvole kahle kutawufikeka. So lama capital projects akenda lokho ukuthi ngathi enda ukuthi kube nguoil walo kusebenta kwelive kube kusebendeke njengoba kukhulunywa njengemahulumba lakhiwako lama factory shells kusho ukuthi loyo lofuna kusebentela tesaqala ku cost yekwakha litamthatha kumbe bo 6-8 months but so ufika uyarenta so uyasebenta so it has speeded up the process yekusebenta.
Thank you, Nyamatane. Dr. Chongo, we are closing now, and I just need you to give me a short, brief summary on what your view is on the minister saying, because we're coming back from a period where the cost of living adjustment was suspended for a number of years because of economic reasons. But the minister is assuring the nation that cost of living adjustment has been allocated 300 million. I need you to quickly speak to the issue of the reduction of corporate tax from 27% to 25% as well. What does this really mean? What is the strategy behind the minister speaking into these issues?
First things first, let us not forget the budget strategy which government is using. Once we understand the strategy, it will be easy for us to support and cooperate with the vision of the country at large. Government is emphasizing on what we call fiscal consolidation strategy. Now, fiscal consolidation strategy, it is not basically a strategy which is long-term. It looks at the immediate effects so that we can be able to remain sustainable. So in the issues of, for example, corporate tax revision, it's basically looking at the fact that much of that sector was heavily affected with both the COVID issue, social unrest, and reducing tax. It's basically an incentive for rehabilitation, and not only that, also to attract foreign direct investment. Then on the aspect of the individuals, we see that the disposable income is going to be stimulated for the benefit of everyone. So it is basically inclusive kind of a strategy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chong. I will have to apologize that we have to end it here today. And the two gentlemen, the two of you, I will have to ask you to be with me on Sunday on our other program, where we can just dissect these issues more and more. Maswata ke sibongele kakhulu kuba nathi ke ehlelweni noma ke lapho khona besikhathe ke sinithulela khona ke emaphakelo atoketa imali kuvele lokunyenti maswata amahle lokunye kuyakhona kusiniketa ke lithemba njengoba ke ishilo ke indvuna. In particular, I'm sure the corporate community will appreciate the reduction of corporate tax from 27% to 25%. We are still a long way compared to our peers in the region. Botswana is at 15%, but I'm sure the minister is taking that direction to say we are going to do these things until investors see us as an investor-friendly country. Kanzi ngoba ngivetile maswatla mahle lokuningi kutavela ke tindzabeni namuhla emini kuvele ke tindzabeni entsambama kanti ke singanimema futhi nasehlelweni embili kanye kanye this coming Sunday, just so we speak into these issues in a more detailed and more calm way kuteke maswati athole kahle nalawo kumbela kangatholi ukuthi kwendekani. Sibongele kakhulu maswati amahle, Jehova kasigcine, sibonane ngalokudako siphilile, nisale kahle.
It all begins with a dream. Even in the middle of a pandemic, when so much has been lost and many hopes and dreams deferred, we still believe that new dreams can be realized. Even in tough times, hope can heal even the deepest wounds and see our country, its people, and the youth live to dream again. Because we believe that every great journey begins by taking that very first step. We invested 75,000 in Malangeni towards making sure that over 200 pairs of small feet can wear shoes to school and be allowed to chase their dreams. Because we believe in fueling tomorrow's dreams today, we invested 150,000 in Malangeni towards supporting the Junior Achievement National Program and the Enactus Program in 2021. Because we believe a healthy nation is a nation destined for greatness. On International Women's Day, 8 March 2021, we opened the door to a fully refurbished, COVID-compliant ward for our mothers, our sisters, and our daughters. We invested 1.5 million in Malangeni in collaboration with the Resource Mobilization Committee towards the rehabilitation of the Raleigh Fitkin Memorial Female Ward. Because we believe that the future is in our hands and the wealth is in our soil, we are helping train women and the youth to realize their dreams. 500,000 in Malangeni was invested towards the purchase of 4 farming tunnels for the innovative Tunnel Agri Project in partnership with the Women Farmer Foundation and the United Nations. Because when we rebuild together, we can thrive even better than yesterday. We invested 9,000 facial masks to 4,500 students and teachers in 8 community schools. Sewing machinery to young female entrepreneurs, as well as welding tools and equipment to the School for the Deaf. All in partnership with the Royal Eswatini Sugar Corporation. Since 1998, Eswatini has banked on us to fulfill her dreams. Eswatini is our home, and because you can dream, you help us drive her growth. Together, Standard Bank, it can be. Wherever your dreams take you, we can make it easy for you to take care of those you left behind.
Alo,
Hey mkhulu,
Musa unkosi yami mfana wami nguwe.
ukufolile lokuncane.
Lokuku
Khona mkhulu kulapha ecingweni.
aso ubuke lapha uthi lo mnakeni ukhona la kufakile lokuncane la licingweni.
Na imali mkhulu uyitfumelele nga unayo.
Awu ngiyabonga kakhulu mfana wami. Buka phela seyingisitile le mali sengidawubhadalela lo dzadzewenu lesikolweni.
Nga unayo ungakhokha imali ku-ATM, uthenge gesi noma i-airtime, uphinze ukhone kubhadala nga-scan to pay. There you have it, the Unayo app. Balisela Unayo lomuhla mahala ha. Facata *334# or download the Unayo app via the Play Store, the App Store or the Huawei app gallery. Standard Bank, it can be.